Constitution of India. Part 2. Citizenship. Article 9. Persons, voluntarily acquiring citizenship of a foreign state, not to be citizens. No person shall be a citizen of India by virtue of Article 5, or be deemed to be a citizen of India by virtue of Article 6 or Article 8, if he has voluntarily acquired the citizenship of any foreign state. Constitution of India. Part 2. Citizenship. Article 10. Continuance of the rights of citizenship. Every person who is, or is deemed to be a citizen of India, under any of the foregoing provisions of this part shall, subject to the provisions of any law that may be made by Parliament, continue to be such citizen. Constitution of India. Part 2. Citizenship. Article 11. Parliament, to regulate the right of citizenship by law. Nothing in the foregoing provisions of this part shall derogate from the power of Parliament to make any provision with respect to the acquisition and termination of citizenship and all other matters relating to citizenship. Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. General. Article 12. Definition. In this part, unless the context otherwise requires, the state includes the Government and Parliament of India, and the Government and the legislature of each of the states, and all local or other authorities within the territory of India, or under the control of the Government of India. Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. General. Article 13. Laws, inconsistent with, or in derogation of the fundamental rights. All laws in force, in the territory of India, immediately before the commencement of this Constitution, insofar as they are inconsistent with the provisions of this part, shall to the extent of such inconsistency, be void. The state shall not make any law, which takes away, or abridges, the rights conferred by this part, and any law, made in contravention of this clause, shall, to the extent of the contravention, be void. In this article, unless the context otherwise requires, law includes any ordinance, order, bylaw, rule, regulation, notification, custom or usage having, in the territory of India, the force of law. Laws in force includes laws passed or made by a legislature or other competent authority, in the territory of India, before the commencement of this Constitution, and, not previously repealed, notwithstanding that any such law, or, any part thereof, may not be then in operation, either at all, or in particular areas. Nothing in this article shall apply to any amendment of this Constitution, made under Article 368. Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. Right to equality. Article 14. Equality before law. The state shall not deny to any person equality before the law, or the equal protection of the laws within the territory of India. Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. Right to equality. Article 15. Prohibition of discrimination, on grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. The state shall not discriminate against any citizen, on grounds only of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, or any of them. No citizen shall, on grounds only of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth or any of them, be subject to any disability, liability, restriction or condition, with regard to access to shops, public restaurants, hotels and places of public entertainment, or the use of wells, tanks, bathing ghats, roads and places of public resort, maintained wholly or partly out of state funds, or dedicated to the use of the general public. Nothing in this article shall prevent the state from making any special provision for women and children. Nothing in this article, or in Clause 2 of Article 29, shall prevent the state from making any special provision for the advancement of any socially and educationally backward classes of citizens, or for the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes. Nothing in this article or, in subclause G of Clause 1 of Article 19, shall prevent the state from making any special provision, by law, for the advancement of any socially and educationally backward classes of citizens, or for the scheduled castes or the scheduled tribes, insofar as such special provisions relate to their admission to educational institutions, including private educational institutions, whether aided or unaided by the state, other than the minority educational institutions referred to in Clause 1 of Article 30. Nothing in this article or sub-clause G of Clause 1 of Article 19 or Clause 2 of Article 29 shall prevent the state from making any special provision for the advancement of any economically weaker sections of citizens, other than the classes mentioned in clauses 4 and 5. And any special provision for the advancement of any economically weaker sections of citizens other than the classes mentioned in clauses 4 and 5, insofar as such special provisions relate to their admission to educational institutions, including private educational institutions, whether aided or unaided by the state, other than the minority educational institutions referred to in Clause 1 of Article 30. Which in the case of reservation would be in addition to the existing reservations, and subject to a maximum of 10% of the total seats in each category. Explanation. For the purposes of this article, and Article 16, economically weaker sections shall be such as may be notified by the state from time to time on the basis of family income and other indicators of economic disadvantage. Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. Right to equality. Article 16. Equality of opportunity in matters of public employment. There shall be equality of opportunity for all citizens in matters relating to employment or appointment to any office under the state. No citizen shall, on grounds only of religion, race, caste, sex, descent, place of birth, residence or any of them, be ineligible for, or discriminated against in respect of, any employment or office under the state. Nothing in this article shall prevent Parliament from making any law, prescribing, in regard to a class, or classes, of employment, or appointment to an office, under the government of, or any local or other authority, within a state or union territory. Any requirement as to residence within that state or union territory prior to such employment or appointment. Nothing in this article shall prevent the state from making any provision for the reservation of appointments, or posts, in favor of any backward class of citizens, which, in the opinion of the state, is not adequately represented in the services under the state. Nothing in this article shall prevent the state from making any provision for reservation in matters of promotion, with consequential seniority, to any class or classes of posts in the services under the state, in favor of the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes, which, in the opinion of the state, are not adequately represented in the services under the state. Nothing in this article shall prevent the state from considering any unfilled vacancies of a year, which are reserved for being filled up in that year, in accordance with any provision for reservation made under Clause 4 or Clause 4A, as a separate class of vacancies to be filled up in any succeeding year or years, and such class of vacancies shall not be considered together with the vacancies of the year in which they are being filled up for determining the ceiling of 50% reservation on total number of vacancies of that year. Nothing in this article shall affect the operation of any law, which provides that the incumbent of an office in connection with the affairs of any religious or denominational institution, or any member of the governing body thereof, shall be a person professing a particular religion or belonging to a particular denomination. Nothing in this article shall prevent the state from making any provision for the reservation of appointments or posts in favor of any economically weaker sections of citizens, other than the classes mentioned in Clause 4, in addition to the existing reservation, and subject to a maximum of 10% of the posts in each category. Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. Right to equality. Article 17. Abolition of untouchability. Untouchability is abolished and its practice in any form is forbidden. The enforcement of any disability arising out of untouchability shall be an offense punishable in accordance with law. Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. Right to equality. Article 18. Abolition of titles. 1. No title, not being a military or academic distinction, shall be conferred by the state. 2. No citizen of India shall accept any title from any foreign state. 3. No person who is not a citizen of India shall, while he holds any office of profit or trust under the state, accept without the consent of the President any title from any foreign state. 4. No person holding any office of profit or trust under the state shall, without the consent of the President, accept any present, emolument, or office of any kind from or under any foreign state. Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. Right to freedom. Article 19. Protection of certain rights regarding freedom of speech, etc. All citizens shall have the right a. to freedom of speech and expression, b. to assemble peaceably and without arms, c. to form associations or unions or cooperative societies, d. to move freely throughout the territory of India, a. to reside and settle in any part of the territory of India, and g. to practice any profession, or to carry on any occupation, trade or business. Nothing in sub-clause A of clause 1 shall affect the operation of any existing law, or prevent the state from making any law, insofar as such law imposes reasonable restrictions on the exercise of the right conferred by the said sub-clause, in the interests of the sovereignty and integrity of India, the security of the state, friendly relations with foreign states, public order, decency or morality, or in relation to contempt of court, defamation, or incitement to an offense. Nothing in sub-clause B of the said clause shall affect the operation of any existing law insofar as it imposes, or prevent the state from making any law imposing, in the interests of the sovereignty and integrity of India or public order, reasonable restrictions on the exercise of the right conferred by the said sub-clause. Nothing in sub-clause C of the said clause shall affect the operation of any existing law insofar as it imposes, or prevent the state from making any law imposing, in the interests of the sovereignty and integrity of India or public order or morality, reasonable restrictions on the exercise of the right conferred by the said sub-clause. Nothing in sub-clauses D and A of the said clause shall affect the operation of any existing law insofar as it imposes, or prevent the state from making any law imposing, reasonable restrictions on the exercise of any of the rights conferred by the said sub-clauses, either in the interests of the general public, or for the protection of the interests of any scheduled tribe. Nothing in sub-clause G of the said clause shall affect the operation of any existing law, insofar as it imposes, or prevent the state from making any law imposing, in the interests of the general public, reasonable restrictions on the exercise of the right conferred by the said sub-clause, and, in particular, nothing in the said sub-clause shall affect the operation of any existing law, insofar as it relates to, or prevent the state from making any law relating to 1. the professional or technical qualifications necessary for practicing any profession, or carrying on any occupation, trade or business, or 2. the carrying on, by the state, or by a corporation, owned or controlled by the state, of any trade, business, industry or service, whether to the exclusion, complete, or partial, of citizens, or otherwise. Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. Right to Freedom. Article 20. Protection, in respect of conviction for offences. No person shall be convicted of any offence except for violation of a law, in force, at the time of the commission of the act, charged as an offense, nor be subjected to a penalty greater than that which might have been inflicted under the law in force at the time of the commission of the offense. No person shall be prosecuted and punished for the same offense more than once. No person accused of any offense shall be compelled to be a witness against himself. Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. Right to freedom. Article 21. Protection of life and personal liberty. No person shall be deprived of his life or personal liberty, except according to procedure established by law. Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. Right to freedom. Article 21a. Right to education. The state shall provide free and compulsory education to all children of the age of 6 to 14 years, in such manner as the state may, by law, determine. Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. Right to freedom. Article 22. Protection against arrest and detention in certain cases. 1. No person who is arrested shall be detained in custody without being informed, as soon as may be, of the grounds for such arrest. Nor shall he be denied the right to consult, and to be defended by a legal practitioner of his choice. 2. Every person who is arrested and detained in custody shall be produced before the nearest magistrate, within a period of 24 hours, of such arrest excluding the time necessary for the journey from the place of arrest to the court of the magistrate, and no such person shall be detained in custody beyond the set period, without the authority of a magistrate. 3. Nothing in clauses 1 and 2 shall apply to any person who for the time being is an enemy alien, or to any person who is arrested or detained, under any law providing for preventive detention. 4. No law providing for preventive detention shall authorize the detention of a person for a longer period than 3 months, unless an advisory board consisting of persons who are, or have been, or are qualified to be appointed as judges of a high court, has reported, before the expiration of the said period of 3 months, that there is in its opinion sufficient cause for such detention, provided that nothing in this subclause shall authorize the detention of any person, beyond the maximum period prescribed by any law made by Parliament, under subclause B of clause 7. Or, such person is detained, in accordance with the provisions of any law made by Parliament, under subclauses A and B of clause 7. 5. When any person is detained in pursuance of an order made under any law, providing for preventive detention, the authority making the order shall, as soon as may be, communicate to such person the grounds on which the order has been made, and shall afford him the earliest opportunity of making a representation against the order. 6. Nothing in clause 5 shall require the authority making any such order, as is referred to in that clause, to disclose facts, which such authority considers to be against the public interest to disclose. 7. Parliament may by law prescribe a. the circumstances, under which in the class, or classes of cases, in which a person may be detained for a period longer than 3 months, under any law providing for preventive detention, without obtaining the opinion of an advisory board, in accordance with the provisions of subclause A of clause 4. B. The maximum period, for which any person may in any class, or classes of cases, be detained, under any law, providing for preventive detention. And C. The procedure to be followed by an advisory board, in an inquiry, under subclause A of clause 4. The Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. Right against exploitation. Article 23. Prohibition of traffic in human beings and forced labor. 1. Traffic in human beings, and beggar, and other similar forms of forced labor, are prohibited. And any contravention of this provision shall be an offense, punishable, in accordance with law. 2. Nothing in this article shall prevent the state from imposing compulsory service for public purposes. And in imposing such service, the state shall not make any discrimination on grounds only of religion, race, caste or class or any of them. The Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. Right against exploitation. Article 24. Prohibition of employment of children in factories, etc. No child below the age of 14 years shall be employed to work in any factory or mine, or engaged in any other hazardous employment. The Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. Right to freedom of religion. Article 25. Freedom of conscience, and free profession, practice and propagation of religion. 1. Subject to public order, morality and health, and, to the other provisions of this part, all persons are equally entitled to freedom of conscience, and the right, freely to profess, practice, and propagate religion. 2. Nothing in this article shall affect the operation of any existing law, or prevent the state from making any law, regulating or restricting any economic, financial, political or other secular activity which may be associated with religious practice. B. Providing for social welfare and reform, or the throwing open, of Hindu religious institutions of a public character, to all classes, and sections, of Hindus. Explanation 1. The wearing and carrying of kirpans, shall be deemed, to be included, in the profession of the Sikh religion. Explanation 2. In sub-clause B of clause 2, the reference to Hindus, shall be construed, as including a reference to persons professing the Sikh, Jaina, or Buddhist religion, and the reference to Hindu religious institutions, shall be construed accordingly. The Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. Right to freedom of religion. Article 26. Freedom to manage religious affairs. Subject to public order, morality and health, every religious denomination, or any section thereof, shall have the right a. To establish and maintain institutions for religious and charitable purposes. B. To manage its own affairs, in matters of religion. C. To own, and acquire, movable and immovable property, and D. To administer such property in accordance with law. The Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. Right to freedom of religion. Article 27. Freedom as to payment of taxes, for promotion of any particular religion. No person shall be compelled to pay any taxes, the proceeds of which are specifically appropriated in payment of expenses for the promotion or maintenance of any particular religion or religious denomination. The Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. Right to freedom of religion. Article 28. Freedom as to attendance at religious instruction, or religious worship, in certain educational institutions. 1. No religious instruction shall be provided in any educational institution, wholly maintained out of state funds. 2. Nothing in Clause 1 shall apply to an educational institution which is administered by the state, but has been established under any endowment or trust, which requires that religious instruction shall be imparted in such institution. 3. No person attending any educational institution recognized by the state, or receiving aid out of state funds, shall be required to take part in any religious instruction that may be imparted in such institution, or to attend any religious worship that may be conducted in such institution or in any premises attached thereto, unless such person or, if such person is a minor, his guardian has given his consent thereto. The Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. Cultural and Educational Rights. Article 29. Protection of interests of minorities. 1. Any section of the citizens residing in the territory of India, or any part thereof having a distinct language, script, or culture of its own, shall have the right to conserve the same. 2. No citizen shall be denied admission into any educational institution, maintained by the state, or receiving aid, out of state funds, on grounds only of religion, race, caste, language or any of them. The Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. Cultural and Educational Rights. Article 30. Right of minorities to establish and administer educational institutions. 1. All minorities, whether based on religion or language, shall have the right to establish and administer educational institutions of their choice. In making any law providing for the compulsory acquisition of any property of an educational institution, established and administered by a minority, referred to in Clause 1. The state shall ensure that the amount fixed by or determined under such law, for the acquisition of such property, is such, as would not restrict or abrogate, the right guaranteed under that clause. 2. The state shall not, in granting aid to educational institutions, discriminate against any educational institution, on the ground that it is under the management of a minority, whether based on religion or language. The Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. Saving of certain laws. Article 31A. Saving of laws providing for acquisition of estates, etc. Notwithstanding anything contained in Article 13, no law providing for the acquisition by the state, of any estate or of any rights therein, or the extinguishment or modification of any such rights, or the taking over, of the management of any property by the state, for a limited period, either in the public interest, or in order to secure the proper management of the property, or the amalgamation of two or more corporations, either in the public interest, or in order to secure the proper management of any of the corporations, or the extinguishment or modification of any rights of managing agents, secretaries and treasurers, managing directors, or managers of corporations, or of any voting rights of shareholders thereof, or the extinguishment or modification of any rights accruing by virtue of any agreement, lease or license for the purpose of searching for, or winning, any mineral or mineral oil, or the premature termination or cancellation of any such agreement, lease or license, shall be deemed to be void on the ground that it is inconsistent with, or takes away or abridges, any of the rights conferred by Article 14 or Article 19. Provided that, where such law is a law, made by the legislature of a state, the provisions of this article shall not apply thereto, unless such law, having been reserved for the consideration of the President, has received his assent. Provided further, that, where any law, makes any provision for the acquisition by the state, of any estate and where any land comprised therein is held by a person under his personal cultivation, it shall not be lawful for the state to acquire any portion of such land, as is within the ceiling limit, applicable to him under any law for the time being in force, or any building or structure standing thereon or tenant thereto, unless the law relating to the acquisition of such land, building or structure, provides for payment of compensation, at a rate, which shall not be less than the market value thereof. In this article, the expression estate shall, in relation to any local area, have the same meaning as that expression, or its local equivalent has in the existing law, relating to land tenures in force, in that area, and shall also include any jagir, inam, or muafi, or other similar grant. And, in the states of Tamil Nadu and Kerala, any janmam right. Any land held under Ryotwari settlement. Any land held, or let for purposes of agriculture, or for purposes ancillary thereto, including waste land, forest land, land for pasture, or sites of buildings, and other structures occupied by cultivators of land, agricultural laborers, and village artisans. The expression, rights, in relation to an estate, shall include any rights vesting in a proprietor, sub-proprietor, under-proprietor, tenure-holder, rayat, under-rayat, or other intermediary and any rights, or privileges in respect of land revenue. The Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. Saving of certain laws. Article 31b. Validation of certain acts and regulations. Without prejudice to the generality of the provisions contained in Article 31a. None of the acts and regulations specified in the 9th schedule, nor any of the provisions thereof shall be deemed to be void, or ever to have become void on the ground that such act, regulation or provision is inconsistent with, or takes away or abridges any of the rights conferred by any provisions of this part. And, notwithstanding any judgment, decree or order of any court or tribunal, to the contrary, each of the said acts and regulations shall, subject to the power of any competent legislature to repeal, or amend it, continue in force. The Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. Saving of certain laws. Article 31c. Saving of laws giving effect to certain directive principles. Notwithstanding anything contained in Article 13. No law giving effect to the policy of the state towards securing all or any of the principles laid down in Part 4 shall be deemed to be void, on the ground that it is inconsistent with, or takes away or abridges any of the rights conferred by Article 14 or Article 19. And no law containing a declaration that it is for giving effect to such policy, shall be called in question in any court, on the ground that it does not give effect to such policy, provided that, where such law is made by the legislature of a state, the provisions of this article shall not apply thereto, unless such law, having been reserved for the consideration of the President, has received his assent. The Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. Right to constitutional remedies. Article 32. Remedies for enforcement of rights conferred by this part. 1. The right to move the Supreme Court, by appropriate proceedings for the enforcement of the rights conferred by this part, is guaranteed. 2. The Supreme Court shall have power to issue directions or orders, or writs, including writs in the nature of habeas corpus, mandamus, prohibition, quo warranto and certiorari, whichever may be appropriate, for the enforcement of any of the rights conferred by this part. 3. Without prejudice to the powers conferred on the Supreme Court, by clauses 1 and 2. Parliament may by law empower any other court to exercise within the local limits of its jurisdiction all or any of the powers exercisable by the Supreme Court under Clause 2. 4. The right guaranteed by this article shall not be suspended. except as otherwise provided for by this Constitution. The Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. Right to constitutional remedies. Article 33. Power of Parliament, to modify the rights, conferred by this part, in their application to forces, etc. Parliament may by law, determine to what extent any of the rights, conferred by this part, shall, in their application to the members of the armed forces, or the members of the forces, charged with the maintenance of public order, or persons employed in any bureau, or other organization established by the state, for purposes of intelligence or counterintelligence, or person employed in, or in connection with, the telecommunication systems set up for the purposes of any force, bureau, or organization, referred to in clauses A to C, be restricted, or abrogated, so as to ensure the proper discharge of their duties, and the maintenance of discipline among them. The Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. Right to constitutional remedies. Article 34. Restriction on rights conferred by this part while martial law is in force in any area. Notwithstanding anything in the foregoing provisions of this part, Parliament may, by law, indemnify any person, in the service of the Union, or of a state, or any other person, in respect of any act done by him, in connection with the maintenance or restoration of order, in any area within the territory of India, where martial law was in force, or validate any sentence passed, punishment inflicted, forfeiture ordered, or other act done under martial law in such area. The Constitution of India. Part 3. Fundamental Rights. Right to constitutional remedies. Article 35. Legislation to give effect to the provisions of this part. Notwithstanding anything in this Constitution, Parliament shall have, and the legislature of a state shall not have, power to make laws, with respect to any of the matters, which, under Clause 3 of Article 16, Clause 3 of Article 32, Article 33 and Article 34 may be provided for, by law, made by Parliament. And for prescribing punishment for those acts which are declared to be offences under this part. And Parliament shall, as soon as may be after the commencement of this Constitution, make laws for prescribing punishment for the acts referred to in subclause 2. Any law in force immediately before the commencement of this Constitution, in the territory of India, with respect to any of the matters referred to in subclause 1 of clause A, or providing for punishment for any act referred to in subclause 2 of that clause shall, subject to the terms thereof, and to any adaptations and modifications that may be made therein, under Article 372, continue in force until altered, or repealed, or amended, by Parliament. Explanation. In this article, the expression, law in force, has the same meaning as in Article 372.